Well, a very good afternoon to you and welcome back to In Conversation With. This afternoon we are chatting to a consultant. Haven't done that yet on In Conversation. We're chatting to Kirsten Klopper, who has run her own independent consultancy for the past 5 years, working in different areas, but more specifically in diversity and inclusion. Kirsten, great to have you on In Conversation With. Looking forward to what we have to chat about. We're not going to necessarily chat directly about diversity and inclusion. We're going to be chatting about mentorship this afternoon because that's an area that you are starting to focus on. And I guess the first question that springs to mind immediately is, for many people who hear the word mentor, they may think coach. Is there a difference between mentors and coaches?
Yeah, very specific difference. So where coaching is focused on a coach asking very specific questions, the idea is that it's a process of discovery for the coachee. So typically the coachee sets the agenda and it's a defined process, if you like. And through the questions that the coach asks, they discover the answers that are inside of them. Mentoring is far more, in a sense, directive, but it's about mentoring in a space where I have experience and expertise and I can share my knowledge and share information, access to information and networks. So very, very, very different to coaching. A coach doesn't need to have skill in the area of the person that they, expertise, or be in the same sector as the person they're coaching.
So I would imagine that when it comes to deciding who chooses whom, the mentor or the mentee, that's quite a critical part of the process. Who chooses whom?
Great question. Mentee chooses the mentor. I've experienced it both ways. So I was once invited to mentor someone. Didn't work. Unless a mentee wants to be mentored, you're going to really struggle. So typically a mentee would choose who do they want to work with, and based on a number of different things, which we can talk about. But yeah, it's important that a mentee decides who to work with.
Well, that segues very nicely into the next question is, what does one look for in a mentor?
Yeah, so I think a few things. Number one, I would say commitment. It's about choosing to work with somebody that you know has your back, that you know who will champion you, who has your best interests at heart and wants you to succeed. I think the other thing, so some of this might sound a little bit obvious, but there needs to be a rapport and a connection. The mentee needs to feel that they can trust me, that I'm safe, that I will respect confidentiality. So particularly in the mentorship relationship, part of the experience with the mentee is being able to talk about stuff that's difficult at work. And that's just uncomfortable. So there's got to be a level of trust. There's got to be a level of comfort. I think the other thing is that there does need to be a level of mutual respect. So because of the nature of the mentorship relationship, where I'm offering my knowledge and my skills, the mentee needs to know that I'm not just sort of smoking through my hat. I'm talking about stuff that maybe I know about. And at the same time, I want to respect the mentee, that I'm not speaking to somebody who's a blank slate. So they come with their own experience, their own knowledge and wisdom.
Well, that raises an important question there, because obviously it's a relationship that you are forming with the person that you are mentoring. So you obviously look for particular things in potential mentees. What are you looking for? You've mentioned some of them, I think, but are there others that you specifically look for when you take a mentee on board?
Yeah. So in my, again, I'm speaking very specifically of my own experience of mentoring. I can't mentor unless there's a kind of a curiosity and a desire to learn on the part of the mentee. So for me, it's around the kind of questions that they're asking and a willingness to learn and an openness. It doesn't mean that they've got to do everything I say. I mean, their experience is as valid as mine, but there's something about building, it's a reciprocal relationship in the sense of we're navigating stuff together. So I share my knowledge, I share my experience, but there is something collaborative in the nature of the work that we do together.
Because it's a relationship, is there the space in a mentor-mentee relationship where you get to a point and you decide, actually, look, this is not going to work. and you're able to call it off. Is there that level of relationship? Do you think you get to that depth of relationship, or is it some kind of other relationship that you form?
Yeah, no, definitely. So again, speaking of current experience that I have, one of my approach is that as long as I'm bringing value to the mentor-mentee relationship, great. The minute I've shared all that I have to share, or that it's served its purpose with the mentee, it's time to let go. So it's not about kind of inserting myself as I'm your advisor. It's not that. And I think it's an important thing to recognize that it's for a season. So one of the things about mentorship is it can be formal and informal. I've been, there are times that I need to be mentored and I'll approach somebody to learn something. There are times I mentor others. And as long as we both recognize it's for a purpose, it's for a season. I can't teach you everything I know. So, maybe go find somebody else who can meet the specific need that you have in whatever area it's going to be.
I guess that also is quite a significant difference perhaps between mentors and coaches, in that coaches, you can just keep going and keep going and keep going because there's always this need to, self-improve, whereas it seems to be more goal-orientated with mentorship. It's like you were saying, it's for a season. So obviously you set quite clear goals in your mentor-mentee relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is debatable. Coaches might object to what you're saying because I think similarly, a coach will also say, so again, if I can relate to my own experience, it's typically with coaching sort of 6 sessions, what are the things you want to achieve? It's more that the journey to get there is very different. And I guess, in a sense, what you're touching on is a risk that applies to any relationship where you have the mentor, the mentee, the coach, the coachee. Again, I don't want to speak for therapists, but the counselor, the person being counseled, is, one doesn't want to create dependency. I don't want to come in and have the person that I'm supporting feel like they can't do anything without me. The whole thing is to be enabling and empowering for people to have a sense of confidence. And it speaks a little bit to, again, one of the areas of mentoring that I found is particularly in the workplace, this thing of imposter syndrome, where people feel like, what if I'm discovered as a fraud? What if I don't know enough, or I lack confidence, or whatever? So then what's the work we need to do together around that?
That's quite a brave position to hold, because I guess, and again, I'm saying this so you don't have to say this, is that in some of the other relationships that you've spoken about in therapy, in counseling and those sort of things, is that dependency is very easily created. But what you're saying is actually, you're prepared to walk away from something once you have given what you've given. Now, not many people would be prepared to do that. Is that a conscious decision to mentor in a particular style that you've taken, or is that true of mentoring in general?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think it's very much an approach that I've taken. So for example, with some of the mentees that I'm working with at the moment, so this thing of as long as I'm giving value, so it's a formal relationship. We have a terms of reference, we have an agreement, by the way. So in this particular instance, but it's not time bound. And I've left the ball in their court to say, when you're ready to deal with the next thing, let me know and come back to me, and we'll schedule a time together. So I've left it fairly sort of flexible. I do want to just say one more thing about the importance of the mentor-mentee relationship. It doesn't happen by osmosis. One's got to be intentional. So, and again, that speaks to this question of commitment. So it's as important for the mentee to know that I'm committed. I'm not just going to sort of back off and let them go. And at the same time, I want to know that they value what I have to bring. And if they don't, that's okay. Then we say, right, back to your earlier question. So we've done what we can do for now. Perhaps there are other more useful things to do. Maybe go and do an online course. But what's missing from that is the dimension of relationship. So there is something flexible about it. In a corporate environment, I want to suggest that it's quite different, but
okay.
We can come into that a little
We'll get to that in a second. The question that I have to ask is, why do this? Because it can't be for the money then.
Both and. So again, in informal mentoring, and I've informally mentored small businesses with their strategy, particularly startups. I've mentored students who have who it's kind of navigating career choices, study choices. I love doing that. A lot of the mentoring that I am particularly passionate about is early stage professionals and kind of early to mid stage professionals, because of the particular challenges that people face in the workplace. And then we will formalize that relationship, and yeah, I get paid. But I set my rates very much depending on who am I working with, who's the client, and what's the nature of what we're agreeing to. So I think that's also perhaps something that's a little bit different around mentoring, I would suggest.
So personal mentoring is obviously one aspect of what you're doing, but at the moment you're facilitating a mentorship program with a large corporate. Tell us something a bit about how, well, what you're doing in that corporate space and how different it is from, say, one-on-one personal mentoring.
Yeah. So in the corporate space, I've been contracted to work with a corporate, and we're designing a mentorship program together. So it's very much about meeting their requirements, and it's me bringing in my expertise and experience around mentorship to design a program. The idea of it is that I then facilitate the training of their leadership and management around this whole mentorship space. Interestingly, people are not necessarily comfortable with it. There's suddenly this expectation, both in terms of, I think, where am I going to find the time? What's expected of me? How do I set up this relationship? I do, if I may, I do just want to speak a little bit to why the need for mentorship in institutions. So not about the specific client, but one of the things about the South African workplace in particular is that it's not known for its inclusivity. It's not known as a space across multiple dimensions of difference, but particularly in this country, race and gender. And so there's a lot of kind of unconscious whiteness in the way that institutional culture has been shaped. And that makes it really hard to navigate for somebody moving into space, whether the dimension of difference, whether it's around disability, gender, religion, whatever. How does one now navigate an institutional culture and dynamics that can be really, really challenging? And I think that's where mentorship plays a role. So the other thing, for example, in the South African context, we've been talking about mentorship since I started my career in the 80s. And we talk about succession planning and the struggle to get it right. One can't do either of those things unless mentorship is in place. And so as much as I love doing the individual mentorship, I'm quite passionate about working with organizations and institutions to say we need to look at the institutional culture, and that's where the link to the diversity and inclusion work that I do comes in. It's about dynamics, power dynamics, as well as transfer of skill, transfer of knowledge, that kind of thing.
It's fascinating because I guess you're faced with different challenges in the different spheres in which you work, both corporate and individual. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you are dealing with in the corporate space, not again necessarily with the corporate that you're working with, but that resistance that you may come up against within those organizations, because as you mentioned, people just, they back off and they don't want to participate in something that's quite difficult, with being perhaps honest about their own positions on race, gender, equality, all of those sorts of things.
So let me just the one thing, I mean, even if I look at my own experience in my 20s of entering the workplace, it was very uncomfortable to ever admit to not knowing anything. There's huge, and I think that's not only true in one's 20s. In a workspace, very often there's pressure to perform. There's an assumption and an expectation sometimes that you've got to know your stuff. And so one of the questions is how accepting and open is this environment to me being a learner in this space? And sure, I've got to get up to speed. Sure, I've got to deliver on my KPIs. But as a young woman entering the workspace, I find it incredibly challenging. That's the one thing. The other is that to admit that I don't know what I don't know can also be quite difficult. And, you've got old boys networks. There are, one of the major things in any institution is who's got the power. What are the power dynamics? How embracing is it? How comfortable is it? Do we accept failure? Is it okay to say, I don't know? Is it okay to say, I haven't quite got it right? And so there's a huge onus, I think, on leadership and on management, not to drop standards, but to say, how can I support you? Rather than setting you up to fail, how can I support you? What do you need that will help me enable you to be the best that you can be? And for me, that's a major driver around mentorship is a passion, if you like, to helping people realize their own potential. And it's so satisfying. And I base that also on my own experience. When one masters something, to have had the kind of the champion, going back to what's required of a mentor. There's something, I've got your back, we'll navigate this together, or I'll back you, but it's about you succeeding, and it's about everybody winning.
The big question at the moment for everybody is, particularly in level 4 lockdown, is how do you conduct your business in this period?
Yes. So the way that I do it is, in fact, mentoring lends itself. It's a whole, debate around how great is it to be kind of in relationship over online. Obviously, it's got its drawbacks. But one of the great things about mentorship, if I think of the mentees that I'm working with at the moment, interestingly, we met early in the year before there was any kind of, rumor of pandemic. By the time we scheduled our first meeting, we were having to learn technology. We were having to figure out, how does this thing work? And it's actually worked surprisingly well. I'm a little bit of a Luddite, but in terms of getting online, being able to communicate with each other, have our meetings, that's been great. And with the corporate client that I'm working with, we're looking at options of how do we do this, whether I'm doing training online, or whether part of the nature of the design we have is whether I interview someone, that all of that actually can be done online. So under lockdown, one can do a lot of things. There are also drawbacks. I mean, there's nothing like being physically present with someone, but there are ways around it. So I think online can enhance our learning as much as it can sometimes make it more challenging.
It's been, I think, one of the biggest challenges for any small business during lockdown is how do you pivot into a digital space, and how do you use the technology that's available? And I think you've expressed some of the challenges that a lot of small businesses, whether they be consultancies or whether they be agencies or whatever they are, it's trying to understand the digital kind of environment in which we're in. I guess the question then would be, what are your plans for future growth in your business? How do you grow your business even though we are in this kind of new normal?
Yeah. And so just to be clear, James, are you talking for me specifically, for anybody?
Well, no, I'm talking about your plans for future growth for your business. And if you want to talk generally, that's also great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of, and thank you, because it's something that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. I don't know all the answers, so let me say that. But I am looking, and I work, so let me say, in the diversity and inclusion space, I work a lot with a colleague. In the mentorship space, I work on my own. There are lots of things that we're looking at, for example, in terms of how to provide training online. Some things don't lend themselves to the online space, and that can impact one's business fairly significantly. And so if I talk about the diversity and inclusion space, we're looking at a complete kind of reshift around, or shift around the way that we do our work, which I think is quite appropriate. As far as the mentorship goes, I would love to do more of the same of what I'm doing, because I am enjoying it, the kind of the one-on-one work online. And with corporate clients or institutional clients, of being able to offer online training. So I have options, which is wonderful. And a lot of it's around the access to the technology, access to clients, building networks, that kind of thing.
Kirsten, it has been fascinating talking to you and learning more about mentorship, which I have to say I was pretty deficient in terms of my knowledge of certainly the differences between mentorship and coaching. If people want to get hold of you...
I send you the bill.
I should send you the bill for this. No, let's not even go that day. But What I was going to say is, if people want to get hold of you and have liked what you've heard, what they've heard you saying, and want to engage in at least the initial discussion about mentoring or diversity and inclusion, how do they get hold of you?
Okay, thank you. So I have two ways to contact me. If you are interested in approaching me around mentorship, whether it's as an individual or whether it's as a corporate client, please use the following email address, mentorshipconsultant@gmail.com. In terms of diversity and inclusion, I would prefer that you reach out to me through LinkedIn. So my profile is there. And because I still manage these as two separate, in a sense, service offerings, that would be great. And it would be lovely to hear from people, even just in terms of feedback and what's, any questions that you may have around the kind of thing that I do.
That's brilliant. It's actually, that's a fantastic offer. And I would encourage you on In Conversation to take advantage of that. I guess the thing is like me, if you don't have an idea of what mentorship is, you may have loads of questions before you even want to engage with somebody like Kirsten. Then get hold of her on those email addresses, the email address that was at the bottom of your screen and is there now. Also on her LinkedIn profile, which is there at the bottom of your screen. Make sure that you contact her as soon as possible. As I said, Kirsten, it's been a joy chatting to you this afternoon, and thanks so much for sharing some of your knowledge and your giving up of your time. I forgot to mention that we do have a special guest here today that you may have noticed. Just over there is my little dog, Molly. She is here normally in Conversation, but I tend to hide her behind me. I tend to sit like this. Today I've decided to reveal the special part of In Conversation. Anyway, before I digress, Kirsten, thank you so much for your time. And I do wish you the best of luck with your business. It sounds like there is a massive need for good mentors. And if I were needing mentorship, I would come to you. So there you are.
Thank you. Great. Thanks very much, James. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
This has been another edition of In Conversation with, of course, where we chat to small businesses and chatting to Kirsten Klopper, who is an independent consultant. It's been great spending time with you all. We will catch you again with our next episode of In Conversation with Sue.